Hello and welcome to Pagabo Live, a new initiative designed to promote knowledge in the public sector. My name's Tom, and over the next hour, we'll be talking about the future of social value with some of the construction industry's leading experts.
Thanks, Tom. Morning, everyone. I'm Rhiannon, and I'm a National Strategic Lead at ISG for Social Value.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Fozia Parveen, Head of Social Value and Enterprise at Overbury.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Suzanne Graham, and I'm a director at Turner and Townsend. I'm very passionate about social value.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Will Campbell. I'm the social value engagement lead for Loop, so I work on our sort of client engagement team, sharing best practice.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for joining us today, guys. And thank you to you guys in the audience as well for joining us. Looking forward to a really interesting session. So today's event is a Q&A session in sort of chat show format. So we're going to go through some of the key talking points around social value, how it's measured, and the cultural changes in the industry around social value over the last decade or so, and also into the future. We would love it if you get involved as well. So please feel free to ask as many questions as you like using the Q&A box on the bottom of your Zoom screen. They'll come through to all of us, and we'll make sure that we get through to as many of those as we can at the end of our pre-planned questions. We'll also be running polls throughout the event as usual to gauge your engagement and gauge how much knowledge you've got in a certain sector. So please make sure you're responding to these to help us guide that conversation. And as luck would have it, there you go, our first poll has come up. So how aware are you of what social value incorporates on a scale of 1 to 4? 1 being not very aware and 4 being very aware. Now, what we'd like to see is that growing over the hour that we have here today, and hopefully we'll grow some knowledge as we go through. Just give you another 10 seconds on that to respond. We've got the answers coming in there. And yeah, if we could close that poll now, please. So the good news is we've got a decent level of knowledge to start off with. So this should be a really informed and educated conversation. And we're looking forward to seeing some of the questions that come in. So if you look at those results there, so we have most people in that kind of 2 to 3, so roughly in the middle there, and a few experts on 4. So looking forward to those questions coming in. Right, so moving on then to our first question. We're going to go to Will to start off with this one, but I'd really like to hear everyone's thoughts on it. So I'll point the question to the rest of you as we go throughout. Will, really broad question, but how is social value measured?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I'll take it from sort of obviously a framework provider point of view, and it's called the sort of the traditional approach to measuring value in general. Can be a set of metrics. They can be across multiple areas, so they can be qualitative, they can be quantitative, monetized there as well. At Loop, we take that sort of monetized approach, so that process sort of refers to attaching a proxy sort of financial value to an outcome. And those values represent, the importance to the change that those impacted, rather than it being, an actual financial return there as well. It can be sort of quite a confusing area for some people coming into that sort of social value space there as well. So like I say, measuring that sort of social value involves, evaluating the impact or the outcome of the project. So that could be a range of things. It could be an improvement in self-esteem and purpose. It could be, an increase in wages, economic output there as well. So just to really quickly break down how we at Loop, do that, sort of follow that monetization process, as sort of 4 really key steps. And first is identifying those outcomes as well. So what's the impact on the individual or the area there as well? So like I say, increasing self-esteem and purpose and that sort of thing. We then assess the methodology. So we use social cost benefit analysis within our framework. There are other methodologies out there, just depending on the sort of the valuation approach you want to take. We then find data to sort of go alongside that sort of methodology as well. So that's collating, the highest quality data possible. And that could be things like public spending impact, the Department for Works and Pensions operational savings. It could be something as simple as, economic output there as well. And just to sort of caveat that, a lack of quality data being available can result in that sort of change of evaluation methodology as well, which is quite a key point. If the data is not available there to sort of actually give a robust valuation, then you don't necessarily need to monetize. And that's the approach we take there at Loop as well. The majority of the metrics that we have, do follow that monetization process, but it's not the be all and end all. The main thing is capturing that sort of great outcome or impact on the individual there.
Really good stuff there, Will. Thank you very much for that kind of overview of how Loop does things. Rhiannon, I'll come to you on this one as well. From your perspective, how is social value measured on your side of things?
No, thank you. So mostly within the construction sector, there are various economic tools that are used, including Loop, to measure social value. But I think there's that opportunity to build on the great work that has been done to look at another complementary tool, which assesses the impact that we're having on the individual through our initiatives. Because sometimes when you look at kind of pros and cons of economic tools, they only go so far in assuming that a social value initiative has had a positive impact on individuals. And it isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. So I do feel we need to look at this holistically to understand, what's worked and what's changed. Have we truly had a positive impact on employment, well-being, or an inclusivity initiative, and how do we measure that? I think the kind of discussions that I'm having and hearing, within the measurement arena, and what I feel is advancing, is that more people are aware of using well-being valuation methodology, which measures people's subjective well-being to understand how a non-market good or a social value project, a program, even a government policy has impacted individuals. And that's gaining quite a bit of traction within the UK government and HM Treasury. So I feel ISG, we're looking at that complementary tool to exist our current toolbox of measurement techniques. I do think there's great opportunity in the future to collaborate with platforms such as Loop to really explore this as well.
Excellent. And Fozia, from a kind of Overbury sort of fit out perspective, how does social value kind of measured for you guys?
Well, I've been at Overbury now for about a year, and coming into the business, I was observant that we were doing lots of great work on our projects and our teams right across the UK. And one thing that I found coming in was that, we were doing all this great work, yet we were very humble about shouting about the work that we were doing. And, I wanted to bring some kind of consensus into the business in terms of how we were monitoring, reporting, tracking, and then being able to market this information. But having something that, having a platform that would be able to measure all this systematically across the business, that was, something that we did across the teams, all under one kind of framework or under one kind of measuring platform. And that was introduced last year. And I can say that, with all the tools that are out there to measure our social value, we have got that platform to sort of really have a look at what we are doing in terms of social value, but also being able to really measure what we do. And I think the important thing for me coming in was that, we can say that we're doing all this stuff, but, it was about getting an external platform to sort of verify and rubber stamp our activity. And that was really key for me, to find a platform that was going to be able to say, yes, this has all been verified. It's been externally verified, rubber stamped, say, yes, that has been done. And then for us to then think about how we market that with all the data behind us and all the evidence behind us. So we do have a whole host of tools that we use within the business, externally verified and rubber stamped. And also what Rhiannon just mentioned about looking at the impact and the well-being of the individuals, of the impact that we're making. That's something that I'm now thinking about, how we can implement that, rather than just having some standard proxy values and monitoring the value of what we do, but looking at the impact and the legacy that we are creating as well.
And Suzanne, I imagine that's fairly similar from a Turner and Townsend point of view.
I have to say, yeah, everything that Fozia and Rhiannon said there is very much what with the position that we're in. I think we're all doing a lot of really great work out there, but it's actually, we're not shouting about it and we're not telling people, and we're not creating that sort of sense of community to say that this is what we've done. We do it, but we're just not very good at recording it. At Turner and Townsend, we have developed our own social value app, quite similar and very complementary to what Loop does as well, but it lets us track internally, so that when you are responding to a bid or a tender, then you have this information to your fingertips, and it's actually great to shout about. Tell the industry what we're doing, and it's quite good to learn from other organisations such as Overbury and ISG, just to have a look at and see what are they doing. They're obviously from a contracting perspective as well, and we're from the construction consultancy perspective, so it's very different, but actually it's all the same at the end of the day, and we want to be recognised as the difference that we're making to our communities.
We'll talk about the kind of shared learnings and that kind of collaboration piece a little bit later on. But wanted to move on to talk about a couple of specific schemes or projects. Rhiannon, we'll come to you on this one actually. Is there anything from ISG that you'd like to kind of use as an example of kind of best practice and a great case study?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Thank you. So ISG, we pride ourselves on balancing local community need, our clients' ESG ambitions and central government priorities and agendas. And for every project, we'll use our in-house local needs analysis tool to identify community need, and then we can build on our local engagement from there to determine our project commitments. And also, of course, we'll consider, client commitments as a priority at that tender stage as well. But where I feel it has been different that I'd like to give insight to the public sector of is an example where the ways of working and the collaboration with the client as well and the community has been really maximised. So for this example, we've actually worked very closely with the Ministry of Justice and MACE across 3 projects in England to develop a social value programme and take a consistent approach across those 3 projects. And those commitments have been centred around, prison leaver employment in a bid to reduce reoffending, as well as spending locally, supporting local training, employment and community initiative. But as a result of that proactive approach, the outcomes that we've not just seen have been around, the social value that we've delivered, but we've been really able to kind of develop that shared vision with the client. We continued that open communication to really refine the commitments and discuss wider considerations, to achieve and really maximise our social value outcomes. So we might not be able to do this on every project, but potentially where there are multiple projects in similar size or scale, there's kind of a key takeaway there for clients and contractors to work a little bit differently and encourage that kind of greater proactive collaboration once that kind of contract has been awarded, so that we're really maximising social value for all. So for me, that's a really kind of key takeaway of best practice of ways of working, as well as achieving really good social value across different projects.
Yeah, a really excellent approach, and certainly one that others can learn from. We're going to talk now a little bit about industry standards. A couple more questions before we get to our first audience poll question. We'll go to you with this one to start off with, Will, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on it as well, Suzanne. So what are the kind of industry standards regarding to social value, Will?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Great question. A couple of points to touch on, more sort of like the legislation side of things, and then I'm sure the other panelists on the can add a bit more around their sort of industry specific standards. So without trying to sort of bore everybody with legislation this early in the morning, but the first sort of start of social value, for anyone that wasn't aware, was that sort of Public Services Act in 2012. Essentially the start of sort of social value policy within the UK as well. So that came into effect roughly 2013. Didn't have the biggest impact as people wanted it to, with it just being more of a consideration rather than just sort of like a mandatory sort of weighting within sort of tendering and procurement, that sort of things. That jumps forward to sort of 8 to 10 years later with the construction playbook, setting out key policies and guidance for how public works and projects, are assessed, procured and delivered as well. The biggest sort of impact over the past few years was the PPN 0620. So that's where the mandatory sort of weighting that a lot of people will be aware of, with sort of tendering in central government came in, that sort of minimum 10% weighting, which was a great start. Some local authorities have taken it a step further, up to sort of 20-30% there as well. I think over the next sort of year or two with the upcoming Procurement Acts, sort of roughly October time as well, we'll see that sort of become more and more embedded in sort of procurement side of things as well. I know we've got a little bit of a section on the Procurement Act and sort of impact on social value later on, so I don't want to dive too much into that as well, but hopefully this reform, will make things a bit simpler, faster and more transparent as well there. Rhiannon touched on, getting in touch with your local stakeholders, understanding that local needs analysis as well, and that sort of builds into that sort of transparency side of things that hopefully the Procurement Act will help with.
Excellent. Suzanne, any views from you there on the industry standards from your perspective at Turner & Townsend?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just building on what Will's saying. I mean, there's obviously lots of legislation out there, but every client's really different as well, aren't they, and what the requirements are. And it's also how our clients out there are set up as well. Some are set up better than others, and they have social value teams. They play a part in their procurement teams as well. So it's really good to know what the expectation is of the industry as well. And we want to deliver, but often sometimes because there is no specific standard as well across across all of our clients. They always looked for something different, which is nice in a way, but it would be quite nice to sort of streamline a wee bit or be more measurable in that, as we say, like a 10% or a 20% for each project. But yeah, there's certainly yeah, the legislation certainly helps with our clients as well, with the demands as well. But yeah, it's great.
And Fozia, in the kind of Overbury perspective, how do those industry standards play out on a day-to-day for you guys?
Yeah, so obviously within our tenders and bids, we get that percentage rating that you've got to sort of comply with, and you make sure that you put something into that tender and bid before it even gets to sort of fruition. Like, what are we going to do? And I think, if you look back 10 years ago with environment, there was, the whole talk around environmental legislation and so on. But now on projects, there are compliance requirements on environmental standards that you've got to set as a minimum. And I think, even though there's no kind of legislation as such in terms of, having exact requirements that you've got to do this. If you don't do this, you won't get scored. You might get penalised, you might get penalties, but you won't actually have a knock-on effect. I think moving forward, 10 years on from now, who knows? There's the legislation is there, but there may well be compliance requirements as a minimum on projects and programs down the line. So we've just got to be aware that this isn't going to go away. It is something that's going to stay. Obviously, 4th of July is happening around the corner, with who knows what government will come in, or if it will still be Conservative. And we're not going to go into political talking shop here, but that legislation is there. It's there to stay. There may be some tweaks, but I think the standards are going to be right across the industry, right across businesses, and there's different sectors. And we as a business need to think about this sort of seriously in our tenders and bids, but not just on tenders and bids, but within our business as a structure, as a strategy, embedding social value right to the very start of our programs and initiatives, rather than just when they actually lead on to us from tenders and bid stage.
Great stuff. Thank you very much for your insights there, guys. That's some really good stuff. I've learned a couple of things there myself as well. So Will alluded to it. It's almost like we planned this. We're talking about the Procurement Act a lot at the moment. A lot of things up in the air about it as well. A lot of questions still going on. But Will, how will the upcoming Procurement Act changes affect social value?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Sorry for jumping ahead with that as well. But I think the main difference for social value is there's a change in sort of legal requirement for public sectors when they're awarding contracts to move from MEET to MAP, which is moving from most economically advantageous tender to most advantageous tender. So the removal of that sort of economic aspects, not completely removing, but it not being the sort of the main forefront of deciding or awarding the contract there as well. So I think there's sort of two aims of this move to MAP. Firstly, providing, that contracting authority with a bit more autonomy, choice when it comes to assessing their sort of tenders, especially tenders that best meet their criteria and provide that most overall value, like I say, rather than it just being sort of the economic aspects of things as well. And then on the sort of the flip side, hopefully providing suppliers with a bit more opportunity to actually enter that sort of public sector, like say, by ensuring that price isn't just the determining factor in awarding those contracts as well. And hopefully that'll allow suppliers, to showcase their expertise and work through those sort of socially responsible initiatives as well. I think the main thing, though, to sort of caveat on that is to make sure that when procurers are sort of doing their tenders is to consider proportionality, avoid inadvertently creating barriers, especially for SMEs. It's like I say, the changes in the Act is hopefully to give those SMEs more chance to enter that public sector markets. Like I say, it's just considering that proportionality, not having disproportionate weightings or requirements that those SMEs can't really sort of hit there as well. But I think ultimately, that move from MEET to MAP isn't sort of a fundamental change to the provisions. It's more to re-emphasise the importance of social value or maximise public benefit as it is in the Procurement Act there as well.
Rhiannon, what's ISG kind of seeing, hearing, reading, being advised around these upcoming changes and their effect on social value?
Sure, no, that's a great question. I just want to extend actually Will's point around suppliers. So I agree. I think there's going to be great and more emphasis and opportunity for SMEs or voluntary and community and social enterprises, which are referred to as VCSEs, to access more work within the construction industry. But I do feel there needs to be more support for these organisations to bidding to gain access to work within the construction industry, as sometimes these are quite small organisations that don't have the resource to submit bids, or it might be quite expensive for them to ensure they have all the right documents in place to ensure they comply with supply chain procedures. And then on the flip side, I think in our industry, where there needs to be great awareness of what VCSEs can offer, I think there are myths in the commercial world that because these organisations have a social or environmental mission, that their services, or what they supply might be more expensive, and that is absolutely not the case. So I would encourage organisations to think about strategies around how they can drive VCSE spend. For us at ISG in 2023, we were part of the Social Enterprise UK Procurement Connect pilot, which is all about driving spend with social enterprises. And off the back of that, we've actually launched our own Procuring with Purpose strategy, where we're working quite closely with our operational divisions to onboard more social enterprises, to engage with them and really encourage that spend across our organisation, and look at how we can debunk some of those myths through our engagement. So for us, that is a real focus for us over the next few years for us to try and drive.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for everybody's contributions so far. We are now moving on to that's our second audience poll, not our first. But yes, moving on to our second audience poll. So does your organisation track or monitor social value? Simple yes, no. And this, we've actually got an unsure option as well. There you go. That's been nicely added at the last minute. Cheers, guys. So we've got, we'll give you a couple more moments to respond on that, but looking at the responses so far, there seems to be a fairly overwhelming proportion of answers in the yes section, which is always good to see. If we could close that poll now, please. So as you can see there on screen, we've got 61 out of 89 respondents. So 69% of people on the webinar saying that yes, they do track and monitor social value. So excellent stuff, and really kind of hammering home what we're saying at the minute about how important social value is to the built environment and to the construction industry as a whole. So we'll go to you with this next question, Fozia. So how is the industry accounting for inclusivity, and how can we look to create role models? This next section is going to be all a bit about the kind of cultural change that's needed around the industry and how we can look to kind of push that social value forward. So how can we look to create those role models that we're looking for, Fozia?
Thanks, Tom. It's a great question, a very big question, actually, if you look at the big question as a whole. I think just in terms of where we are at in terms of inclusivity within our business, we make sure that, not one size fits all for each of our projects. We have to look at a bespoke offering for wherever we're operating. We make sure that we look at the local needs analysis, make sure we work with local authorities, key stakeholders in those areas to make sure that we are tapping into what is relevant and what is a real need for those communities. It might not just be unemployment issues going on, it might be obesity rates or whatever it might be. We have to take each project case by case. And I think that's the sort of uniqueness of what we do in terms of making sure that, we have a social value lead in each of our teams right across the UK. Every project will have a social value plan. Depending on the duration of the project, if it's a longer term project, we will make sure there is social value plans in place. And so every project will look at what they can do in terms of making sure it's inclusive, it's reflecting of the communities that we operate in, and it could be all sorts of activities that we do around that particular project. But I think taking that one step back, I think as a business, it's great that we're doing things on projects and making sure that we feed into our communities and make sure that we serve our communities to make them feel part of our business when we're out in the communities. But as a business, we need to seriously think about what we are doing from the very start in terms of our business strategy. Do we combine a business strategy with our diversity inclusion strategy? It should be maybe one and be part of a business forward thinking strategy. And I think that is something that, we have reflected over the last year within our core values at Overbury. So our core values have been changed and reflected in terms of our strategy, in terms of being inclusive, in terms of making sure that we challenge the status quo, you know, and making sure that the whole business is aware that we are now challenging areas that probably people were not going to be challenging openly before. And, you know, we are here to sort of listen and hear our views about employees. And I think, you know, we have these conferences, we have events. And when I go to lots of these conferences and all these events, I look around and I think, do I feel included in this business? Do I feel included in this conference? Do I feel included in this event? And 9 times out of 10, I can feel a little bit isolated, if I'm being completely honest, as an Asian female, you know, in big audiences and big events. And I think, you know, is that something for people like myself and people who are in the social value sector to think about? Well, how can we bring in more diverse communities into these kind of events and conferences, leadership forums, because they are the voices of our, you know, communities that we operate in. You know, even going into meetings, you know, do we bring in, you know, the younger people into our meetings to sort of get their voices heard, to see what they are thinking, what their thoughts are. As a business that operates around fit out, we have 2 of our fit out divisions around Morgan Lovell, which are design. You know, now I know clearly that some of those teams within our design functions are really looking at fabrics, colours, you know, materials that are open and being diverse, making sure that we are inclusive of people from neuro abilities and differences, to make sure they feel included as well. So it's not just about going into fitting out a space and having, you know, prayer rooms and quiet spaces. It's about the fabrics that we use, the colours that we use, you know, all those kind of things really need to take shape. And, you know, also, you know, we feel that, you know, the young people, I know there's probably going to be talking about young people maybe down the line, but young people are such a part of our society and our culture now. We've got to make sure that we are able to bring young, fresh talent into the business. But what are we doing in terms of our recruitment practices? Are we, you know, going to the same old universities and colleges to recruit? Or are we going to those more marginalised universities, the more disenfranchised communities and colleges where they're based, and looking at what can we do to really include people from those backgrounds and marginalised backgrounds within our recruitment practices? So it's really at the start of our business strategies that we've got to start thinking about how we shape the business and be more inclusive right from the very top, and then filter down to our projects.
We've sort of preempted the next question there around the younger generation. Obviously, there's a huge skills gap in construction, as we're well aware, and we've got a bit of a recruitment problem generally as an industry in terms of bringing in younger people. So, how important is the younger generation when thinking about the future of social value? So, Rhiannon, we'll go to you on this one first, because it'd be quite good to get ISG's kind of views on this. But we'll come back to you just after Rhiannon and Fozia.
Wow, thank you. So from my perspective, you know, the younger generation are very important. And as you mentioned there, Tom, you know, it's not just social value within the construction industry as a whole. There is a significant predicted shortfall in the future workforce. But from my view, you know, younger people are our future leaders, they're placemakers, and they're future users of the spaces that we're responsible for creating currently. And they are socially, environmentally conscious. I think from my perspective, you know, when young people do enter the industry, I don't think they're aware of the Social Value Act and the model and how it affects procurement until they do learn about it in the workplace. So I think there is great opportunity to engage with higher education institutions or further education institutions to look at curriculums to see how we can embed some of that information and topic areas around social value, so that they are aware of the Act and the government's priorities and how that affects procurement before they do enter industry. I think there are also groups and networks for young people to really advance the thinking of social value as well. And I'm actually part of the Young Professionals in Social Value Network, and I sit on the steering group for the public sector work stream. And that network connects young people to really facilitate the social value movement across different sectors, where they can learn about social value, the impact, how it's interpreted in other organisations, where it really allows them to kind of facilitate that discussion and creativity and ideas around social value. So I think there's great opportunities for young people to really advance that thinking, and they're incredibly important for the future of social value.
Fawzia, anything to add on that? I know obviously it's a very passionate point for you.
Yeah, it is. Do you know what? I mean, I was talking to a group of young people just last week, some graduates that have joined the business, and a lot of them were saying that actually what's more important for them is to find a company to work for that actually has social value or responsible business practices embedded into their culture rather than the money side of things. And that was really important for me to hear. You know, new graduates coming through and thinking, no, we want to work for someone that really does care about their environments, their communities, their staff well-being. And that was, you know, and I think there was a research report that was done a few years ago by Deloitte, talking about the same thing. And, you know, and hearing it face on with young people now was really inspiring and really sort of refreshing. And I think also, you know, the question saying, are younger people, you know, about, you know, important for the future of social value? Absolutely. I mean, look what's happening in the world of technology, AI. You know, these younger generations are a lot more savvy, they're a lot more switched on in terms of technology. You know, we could be learning from them in terms of, you know, intergenerational kind of expertise in terms of IT and technology. So that's the way the world is moving towards, and we need to be making sure that we bring those young people with those savvy, smart, switched on technology brains into supporting us with our future, you know, programs and projects moving forward. So absolutely, they are key to our future, I believe.
Yeah, it feeds nicely into how we were talking about how businesses are accounting for like their responsible business practices, because certainly from hosting several of these different webinars across the construction industry, we've found exactly what you're saying there, Fawzia, about there is almost a change of priorities, a switch of priorities, particularly within that Gen Z kind of generation as to what they're actually looking for from an employer, and that kind of embedded social value, responsible business practices is absolutely what we're hearing as well. So it's good to know that it's a common theme and everybody's becoming more and more aware of it. We'll come to you on this question. So how are businesses accounting for those responsible business practices?
Thanks, Tom. I think Rhiannon and Fawzia sort of touched on a bit on the last question as well. It's not about you know, just the bid team being aware of social value. I mean, like you say, a lot of people aren't aware of social value or how it sort of impacts their role until it sort of impacts their role, really. I mean, it's about the whole organization. It's crucial for your, you know, your executive team, the whole organization to buy into the sort of the how you want to sort of be a responsible business, how the practices that you want to put in place are there. I mean, much of what organisations like ISG and Overbury be doing now will sort of already establish towards those sort of CSR social value. But it's to be successful, it's your social value needs to be at both company-wide and contract-specific level as well. It's essential that, you know, like I say, everyone buys into it. I think sort of just a starting point is having your whole organisation having a bit of social value training, even if it's just basic, to get that awareness, get that embedded across your entire organisation, and like I say, get everybody sort of on board with it as well. Alongside that, you know, if organisations want to take that a step further, you know, developing a social value strategy, getting input from your stakeholders, from your employees, and how the sort of the practices of your business want to sort of shape there as well.
Thanks, Will. Rhiannon, anything to add? Will, to go back to you as well, Fawzia, on this one. I know it's very much a passionate topic for you. So Rhiannon first, and then Fawzia.
Thank you. So yeah, just building on Will's point there. So I feel, you know, that, you know, social value and, you know, ESG as a whole is a really essential aspect of modern business practice, really, regardless of kind of size or maturity. And it's really key for organisations to lead with that transparency and communicate their progress against social value to really kind of maintain that trust with their stakeholders. I think the challenge is that transparency requires an underlying infrastructure that organisations absolutely need to invest in, whether it's, you know, policies, what Will mentioned around strategies or agreed standards, you know, for better data collection, tracking and assurance. And I think in the future there'll be better opportunity for better data collection and AI, but there needs to be the buy-in and the investment for that from organisations, which is absolutely key.
Fawzia?
Yeah, I echo what Rhiannon and Will are saying there. It is a buy-in from a lot of different departments and divisions to come and buy into this being a responsible business practice. You know, yes, there's strategies out there, there's policies. I think something that, you know, I firmly believe is that social value is everyone's responsibility, regardless of, you know, your day-to-day job. Everybody has a responsibility around social value. And so something that the business have really invested in here is that every new starter that joins the business will have an overview view on we'll have an embedded social value training deck that they will have to go through and comply with. And it's all about social value, why it's important, why it's important for the business, what it means for the business, and why we embed social value across our projects and programs. So every new starter will have an introductory to social value when they join. And I think that's a really good starting point for anyone that joins a business to know that we do ultimately believe in social value right from the very top down before they get onto their projects. And so even if they're not doing social value in their day-to-day job as a job, their role, it is part and parcel of what they do with those projects and programs that are initiated on their developments and teams.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your views on that section, guys. That was a really informative chat and a bit of an eye-opener. So we are getting really well through these questions now. We've got a couple more of the questions that we've kind of pre-planned and pre-discussed with the panel, but we'd really like to hear your views as well. We've seen a couple of Q&A questions come in already, but if you'd like to get yours in, please feel free to use that Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. But before we move on to those last couple of questions that we have in, let's take a look at the next poll, which is, how does your organization currently track or monitor social values? This is one of real interest to you, Will, I'm sure. It's to see, we've got Excel, a software tool, paperwork, or we don't track our social values. So we'll give that a couple more moments while we've got get a few more people to respond. And this one is a lot closer than the last one was, so this is a very interesting discussion point to get into potentially before we start the wider audience Q&A. Yeah, if you can close that poll now, please. So as you can or should be able to see on screen, it's pretty close between good old Excel and a dedicated software tool, which is kind of reflective of what I think we were saying earlier on, in that there's a bit of a combination of different tools and different approaches going on. But there's still, interestingly, still 23%, so around a quarter of those that responded to the poll in the audience, saying that they don't currently have a way of tracking and monitoring their social values. So certainly something we can come on to as we get to the questions later on in the webinar. So we'll go to you on this one, Suzanne. So a couple of questions here just around generally what's being expected of social value and how we can look at those cultural changes that we've discussed. So we'll start with you on this one, Suzanne. Is the public sector demanding more from social value at the moment?
I don't think so much that they're demanding more. I think it's often it's the guidance that comes out with the public sector procurement, so through the ITTs and the PQQs that come out, and we're responding back. I think social value means something different to every public sector organisation as well, and they often put out, yes, we're looking for X, Y, and Z. However, if there's not any guidance, you never know if you're responding with too much or too little. And I think that can always be quite difficult as well. So we are saying, yes, we can do X, Y, and Z, but actually they're looking for 10 times that as well. So what we find, or what my preference certainly is, and our bidding team when we're looking at it, is we would like a menu. A lot of public sector clients do that. So we respond to a menu saying we've got targeted points, but often we don't go for the minimum targeted points. It's just to give us a bit of a guidance so that you know that what we're saying we're able to do, we can actually deliver, but also we're willing to give more as well. I think we also need to look at local needs in the surrounding area, and I think Rihanna and Fozzie have also picked up on that. It's not just about a tick box exercise here, it's what we can actually do in those local areas, and what our expertise is certainly different from, not different, but it's slightly, it's not the same as what a contracting organisation from a consultancy organisation would offer as well. So it's the recognition there that not one size fits all. So I would say, maybe from a contracting organisation, there's far more in terms of numbers. So if you're doing like a volunteer day or whatever, you've got more man and woman power behind you than probably a consultancy has as well. So I think it's having a deep thought and a conversation, and maybe looking at a good a Q&A session maybe on social value at the beginning of a tender as well, because it is just as important to us as a business as it is to our clients out there as well, and we want to make sure that we fulfill that.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Suzanne. So we're going to go now on to, this is our final kind of question that we've got in our list. So please feel free to put a few more into the Q&A section, and we'll get to our audience questions in a moment. We'll start with you on this one, Suzanne, but I'd like to get everybody on the panel's views on this because it is quite a big and a broad question. What are the cultural changes needed across the industry to look to, I guess, better embed social value? It already sounds like, you know, from what you guys are saying, is that we're beginning to get there in terms of embedding it. But what cultural changes are needed so that we can better embed social value? Suzanne, yeah, you first on this one, please.
I suppose I'll probably just go back to the sort of responding to a tender as well. I think often in the past, and I won't be alone in this, the social value question, you probably used to copy and paste it, the response to the next one, and just go along with it. You can't do that these days, that's the thing. So you have to make it and tailor it to your client every single time. But as a business, you do need to be set up properly. You do need to have the sort of someone that's going the social, a director responsible for social value on that particular project or program of works. I would say the business needs to have a social value policy, which I would imagine all of us in this webinar do have. You need to set yourself up properly as an organisation. Just everything that we've been saying, probably measuring properly and make sure that we're telling our story as well, saying that we're doing these things and not just saying we can do them, but we're actually delivering and what we're saying to our clients that we can do. And it's also having our own ESG targets and goals and aligning our social value for our clients along with our own goals and values. I think that's super important as well.
Thanks, Suzanne. Fawzia, your views on this one, please. What cultural changes do you think are needed?
You know what? I think we're all very good at doing the right thing, aren't we? We always want to do the right thing, and that's a given on lots of projects, lots of programs, lots of staff that I see here every day. You know, they want to do the right thing. I think it would be really great and even better if we have the senior board members doing a lot more in terms of going out there, getting involved, you know, hands-on in the communities on some of the projects that we work on, volunteering, taking up their one-day volunteering, showcasing to the business that there is a day's volunteer day that you have. So it's, you know, it's leading by example. You know, as a line manager, as a leader in the business, it's about doing the things that people can then see and then relate to and maybe feel comfortable to do. So, you know, it's about challenging the status quo, making sure that, you know, we are able to be open and reflective of what our staff are saying and how we can embed some of those changes that are requirements for people to feel comfortable in the business. I know that we're sort of looking at even our sites having, you know, opportunities for people to be able to have safe spaces to go and pray, to, you know, have a space to have a quiet space and so on, not just in our offices, but on our sites, and making everyone feel part of a real change and having that culture that people can then say, well, actually, we can do that over on that site as well, or we can do this on this project, or and so on. So really being instrumental in from the top down. I think that's the key.
Thanks, Fawzia. Will, your views on this, the cultural changes needed across the industry to better embed social value?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I think Fawzia and Suzanne both touched on it there, is that sort of changing mindset across the business. I mentioned it before, you know, the entire sort of executive team, the entire organisation buying into that practice, getting those strategies in place and everyone sort of moving as one team, you know, fostering that changing culture, prioritising, you know, local communities, understanding the area that you're working in. Everyone's, you know, obviously different. Everyone's got their own needs. We've mentioned local needs analysis a couple of times there, as well as getting that in early in that sort of process as well. But yeah, I think the main thing is a change in mindset, getting awareness across the business.
Excellent. Mindset and leadership seem to be the two words that are coming out of this. And finally, from you, Rhiannon, please.
Thank you. So yes, there absolutely is, you know, is a mindset piece. And as I mentioned earlier, for our projects, we take a really considered approach, as Will mentioned there, around the local needs analysis and the client's priorities. And I think, you know, there's a lot of work that actually goes in behind that, and for us to really determine those commitments, and then the delivery side as well. And I think social value has definitely come a long way, but there needs to be greater awareness of what social value and impact is and what it can achieve, and importantly, what it isn't. And I think to work towards that change, as contractors or those in the built environment space, we need to really have more of an open conversation around this. Because so as you've seen there, the conversations around leadership and so forth, and we do experience similar challenges. We really need to look at how we can action solutions together to really kind of support that change in the industry and collaborate on that.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much to all you guys on the panel for responses to those questions. We'll wrap these up with our final poll question now, and this is for our audience. So this is a repeat of the question that we had at the start, but hopefully we'll see a nice positive uptick in the responses. How aware are you now of what social value incorporates? I can already see in my little preview here that this is going to be a nice positive result for everybody involved. So well done, panel. You've helped build some public sector knowledge here around social value. Yeah, if we could just give that one another few seconds, guys, and then close the poll. Thank you. Excellent. So looking at that, 98% of people are either very aware or in that kind of top end of awareness. So excellent result there for everybody involved. Thank you very much to the panel. And we'll now move on to some of our audience Q&A questions. But what I'd like to do actually is I'm going to go to you first, Will, because I think there's a question that occurred to me when we saw that the previous poll around reporting and how people report and how they track their social value. What's the best way to create better efficiencies in reporting social value going forward? Because it seems to me that there's a lot of different potential, disparate methods of tracking and reporting. How's best to create those efficiencies to make it the most, the most well-oiled machine it can be?
I think one of the key things is not asking for everything. I think a lot of people, when they come into the social value spaces, they want to ask for everything, across, social, environmental, economic areas as well. I think drilling down into those key areas that you really want, getting your stakeholders involved early and realizing, well, what can we do that's easy without putting too much pressure on both sides there as well. So yeah, like I say, I think it's just keeping it simple, asking for those key things that you think will mainly impact your stakeholders and your organization the most there.
Brilliant. Right. Well, we'll get our first audience question here. This is coming from Colin Stewart. And I'll put this to you, Rhiannon. It's something that you mentioned earlier around the involvement of SMEs and how they can kind of get more involved with the changes in the Procurement Act and how SMEs can actually have better access to working with the public sector. So we'll start with you, Rhiannon, but feel free anybody to chip in on this. Do the panel have any suggestions for practical steps a small SME can now take in terms of procurement for local authorities and the public sector?
Thank you. So I'm going to put my hands up in that I'm not a supply chain expert, but from my view, kind of practical steps in turn looking at bidding for more work and social and getting more work within the construction sector space. There is different opportunities out there to engage with contractors around how you can kind of be upskilled in those areas to respond to bids and what you need to get on to supply chain on our databases. So actually at ISG currently, and we're looking at how we can engage with VCSEs to do this and see what support they need to really help them get on our databases and then hopefully bid for more work in the future.
Thanks, Rhiannon. Question that's coming from Samantha Pollitt. I'll go to you with this one, Fozia. Has anyone got any tips, or Fozia, do you have any tips on how to help the board members of a company understand the importance of social value to a business? You sort of alluded to it in one of your responses earlier around that kind of leadership and leading by example. Have you got any tips on how people can help those kind of board members and senior team members really understand the value of social value?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we do out on the ground is so impactful and so informative, and so it can change lives. And I think if we can capture that in some kind of case study or newsletter or something, or get people to talk about it on a video and share their experiences, which then can be shown back to the board members and to have that real life impact. I think that's a really good thing. That's something that I think a lot of our teams are now starting to do, looking at pulling together real impactful case studies and information where they've been able to gather all this data that can then lend itself really well to a real positive case study that then can be shared to the rest of the business, and doing like little podcasts, doing like little videos, updates, and getting it across onto your intranet pages so people can see in their free time and you know, allude to things that are happening across the business by saying, don't forget to read this, it's just changed someone's life, or you know, whatever's happened. Sharing that information across to all the teams, I think that, you know, gives a bit of word of mouth. Somebody else says, oh, what do you mean by that? You know, what happened there? What video did you see? Start talking, and that, you know, slowly can get up to the top. And even, you know, people like us who are head of social value, you know, talking directly to our board members about the impacts that we're making in communities, taking them along to some of our projects and programs and seeing for themselves what's going on. You know, it's all a win-win, really.
Will, have you got something to add here as well? I can see you chomping at the bit, ready to go.
Yeah, sorry. I think one key area that people don't normally like to touch on is the financial aspects of things as well. Obviously, board members, executives do just look at that sort of bottom line sometimes. So aligning your social value with those business goals is a key area. Do you know, show the financial benefits of it. Do you know, you can present data, reports on how those, you know, social value initiatives lead to things like cost savings, you know, energy efficiency with your environmental side of things, how it can increase revenue. If you've got a customer base that aligns with your, you know, goals of helping the local community, you know, they continually come back for work, but it can also open up those sort of new market opportunities as well. And on the flip side, you've got that risk management as well. You know, it can mitigate risk. You know, if you hit it, you can get those, you know, fines. It can cause reputational damage as well, and supply chain disruptions as well. So showing those, you know, both the benefits and the negative side of things to them with that bottom line, you know, can hopefully help people get on board.
A little bit of carrot and a little bit of stick.
Yeah, exactly.
Rhiannon, good to hear your view on this as well, actually.
Yeah, just quickly. So, from my perspective, just I guess building on Will's and Faizy's point, really. For me, it is also around that kind of governance structure, to making sure you have that sponsor or that lead in those arenas where, you know, maybe the delivery teams aren't. So when we are having, you know, case studies, there's comms, there's, you know, messaging that's being developed and is being socialized, that is feeding into those arenas where maybe delivery teams aren't present. For us at ISG as well, we have something called a social value champion network, that support us with some of our data collection and so forth. But that is again another route across the organisation to really kind of vocalize what we're doing as well. So I think for me, it's kind of looking at governance structure to really make sure those messages are being heard.
Thanks all for your views on that. We'll come to you with this one, Suzanne, and it's coming from Rebecca Stewart. So when tendering, currently social value is only weighted at typically only weighted at around sort of 5 to 10%. Do we think this will increase over time as industries take it more seriously and understand the importance of the demand for it? It's kind of that broader cultural change question, isn't it, that we talked about? But do you think that there's the likelihood that weighting of social value will increase over time?
I think 100% it'll increase over time. I think, as we said earlier on, it used to be that you would, I shouldn't say that out loud, copy and paste and maybe a response to the social value question, but now you are having to give it some deep thought, and give it some, tailor it to suit that client. But certainly I do see that being on the increase. Why not? I mean, that's the thing. It's we're all very good at it. We talk about it, and the previous question there as well about getting the executive board. Our executive board, it's driven from the board down. So we know that it's super important to our board, and we want to be able to offer that out to our clients. So I do think that this will be, it will start to change, and it will only increase as well. So it's so important. I mean, everything revolves around ESG, doesn't it? Everything that we do, and it's also aligning it with your values as well as a business. So our values, we will put, that's how we push our social value impact, and what we can deliver to clients is aligning with our values as well. So yes, I think watch this space. I think we will see an increase here. So but yeah.
Brilliant. I think we've got time for maybe one, maybe two more questions, depending on how we get through them. A question here from Hazel Durant, which is a really good one. We kind of alluded to it earlier a little bit with collaboration. Obviously, doing events like this is all about collaboration. But Hazel's asking, and we'll go to you with this one first, Rhiannon, but feel free to jump in, anybody who would like to contribute to this. How do you work across your sector to drive change? Is there any kind of shared learnings of you speaking to competitors, essentially saying, we learned in this area, how can we improve and drive this forward? You know, there is obviously that competitive edge there, but is it a case of a rising tide lifts all boats and everybody's trying to push each other forward on this?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I've got 2 points there. So first one kind of alludes to my point earlier around the kind of recent collaboration I previously had with contractors, including Lendlease and Morgan Sindall, where we come together outside of a project and a framework. And we were with social enterprises. Actually, it was an event for Nottingham-Trent University, where we discussed like the emerging areas of social value and the challenges, and that was a really open and honest conversation that we have had. And I think there absolutely needs to be more of that within the industry. I think where it is happening maybe on projects or frameworks is where there are kind of what you call maybe special interest groups or working groups on these topics, including social value, where contractors do get together to kind of discuss maybe challenges or discuss shared practice or case studies and so forth in this area. For me, I think those kind of spaces need to be more developed in the future. There needs to be more of them, but I think also there needs to be more of that showcase of quantitative and qualitative data to show that kind of full picture of the achievements and lessons learned, so that contractors can really learn from that and take that away and maybe carry the conversation outside of that working group as well. Another, just before I finish, sorry, another kind of key example actually is we're part of the New Prisons Programme, part of the MOJ's Alliance programme. And that's where 4 contractors are coming together to develop a consistent programme, including social value. We're quite early in our journey of a part of that programme, but we're starting to learn lessons learned from other contractors in this space. So I definitely think it is happening, but it does need to be pushed more and encouraged more.
Suzanne, is that similar from the kind of consultancy point of view?
I think it's quite different, actually. I would say that we don't necessarily have the same sort of forums as contractors do. I think contractors probably collaborate a bit better. I think we probably do it more from a maybe like not as on a formal basis, but however, I do think I've got lots to learn from Will, Fawzia and Rihanna, like just from what we've been speaking about. We've had a few conversations over the past few weeks, and we certainly can exchange ideas that we can take to our own organisation. So I think it's quite different, but I don't see why we shouldn't have an organisation set up within the consultancy side of things so that we can share that. But yeah, it's something definitely food for thought.
Well, that's a nice message of collaboration to wrap us up on. So that is unfortunately all we've got time for today. So thank you very much for everybody tuning in. We've had really good audience numbers again. You're all now part of the Pagabo Live community just by signing up to today's webinar. So you'll receive a link for our next session, which is going to be in July. The details of that are on screen now, Wednesday, the 24th of July, 3 to 4 p.m. And we're talking about best practice for sustainable and ethical procurement. There'll also be a newsletter coming out around a week after each of these Pagabo Live sessions with a recording of the webinar in video and podcast form. So if you really want to listen to us again in the car, you can do, along with further insights from the wider Pagabo team. So hopefully you've enjoyed today and found it useful. Thank you very much for tuning in, and thank you very much to the panel for being involved. If you did enjoy it and you want to get involved more, please make sure you tell a friend, tell your great Aunt Sandra, and make sure we see you next month for our next session.